Hey and welcome! I hope you are all well. Today is a very special day for me because I just released my first pattern, which is this tote bag pattern Ella. You can find the link to the pattern in the description box and it's the easiest way to support me. I designed the pattern so that you can fit a lot of things like your laptop or a huge folder in it. And also it's very beginner friendly, which is why this tutorial is very detailed. Now, without further ado, let's jump right into the video and subscribe to my channel to not miss out any further videos. Let's start by talking about the fabrics that you could use for this pattern. I recommend a non-stretch fabric such as cotton or linen. I myself did use leather, but it is nearly impossible to turn the straps inside out, so keep that in mind when choosing your fabric. If you choose a rather thin fabric such as cotton, I would recommend to use some stabilization, for example fleece line. I will link some down below, there are different kinds. For example, here we have a rather thin one and this one is rather thick and it gives your project more volume. Now let's actually start to sew. The first step is to take 2 of your 4 C pieces, line them up right sides together. Right sides together means that the beautiful sides do face each other. And then you only sew the top edge with a normal straight stitch, making sure the back stitch at the beginning and the end of the seam. And obviously also do this for the other C pieces. If I don't say anything else, you will need to sew foot wide, so the edge of the foot is like kind of your guideline. That is just easier for beginners, and you also need to sew with a straight stitch. So here's now how it should look like. As you can see, there is the back stitch at the beginning and at the end of the seam, and now there are different options. If you want to, you could zigzag stitch your raw edges or just serge it if you have a serger, but in my case, since the leather is very stiff, I just trim off the excess fabric. Now you turn it to the right side, and as you can see now I kind of use my finger to press the seam in place, but if you use cotton you could definitely just iron it down. The next step is now to top stitch the upper edge with a normal straight stitch foot wide, and this just makes it look more professional. Lay these pieces away for a minute because now we are going to start with the F pieces, which are the handles. With right sides facing and foot wide, you only sew the long edges and leave the short edges unsewn on both sides. That's because we will then use this tool, which is linked in the description box, or you could also just use a normal safety pin to turn the whole thing inside out. Here's now how it looks like, and again you can cut, serge or zigzag stitch the raw edges, then turn it inside out and then top stitch both long edges. Obviously do this also for the other F pieces. Now let's continue with our C pieces, which are the outer pocket, and both our A pieces, which are part of the outer bag. Lay one A piece in front of you so that the longer side is horizontal. Next, place piece C in the middle of the long side of piece A and make sure that the lower edge of piece C finishes with the lower edge of piece A, as you can see right here. If you don't want to have any closure system for your outer pocket, then just sew both sides, right and left, by top stitching it in place, but if you want to have a closure system, there are different options as well. For example, you could use Velcro or some type of metal closure system. But no matter if you use this or that, you always have to attach the closure system just on one side of the outer pocket, so just on one C piece, and obviously on the A piece as well, on the same spot. By the way, you could also do like a hidden pocket inside the outer pocket, because you have two fabrics, and here you could attach a hidden zipper so that there would be a compartment in your pocket itself, and nothing would fall out because it's closed at every side. That could be very practical if you, for example, go to the beach and want to hide, for example, your credit card or some money. If you want to have a tutorial, just drop a comment and I'm sure I can manage to do that. Here's now how I attached the closure system as I explained earlier on, and you cannot see anything from the outside. Now we sew the right and left edge of the outer pocket with a straight stitch, but this time not foot wide. Instead we try to sew as close to the edge as possible so that we don't waste any space in the pocket. We continue with the E-pieces, which will become the inner pocket. In my case it's irrelevant, but you should lay the beautiful sides facing each other together and then sew all the way around, but make sure to leave a turning opening of about 4 centimeters. By the way, here's a tip for every beginner. When sewing corners and you are at the end of one edge, you just lift your presser foot, turn the fabric in the right direction, lower the presser foot again, and then just continue sewing. After using your preferred method of dealing with the excess fabric, turning the whole E-piece inside out and ironing it, the turning opening kind of automatically closes. And also it's important that you just top stitch the upper edge, or just in general one long edge, because now we are going to attach this inner pocket to one D piece that will later become the inner bag. Therefore, copy the markings on the pattern to piece D with a marker. Lay piece E on top of them and top stitch the 3 edges that we haven't top stitched so far, making sure that the pocket opens to the top, and in that step we also close the turning opening, by the way. If you want to, you could just leave it like that so that you have a huge pocket, but you could also top stitch some vertical lines in it so that you have some smaller pockets, as I did here. Just mark a straight line and pin it in place so that it's just more secure, and then sew. As a next step, we are closing the inner bag. Therefore, take the second D piece, lay it on top of the first one, and then make sure that everything is lined up, right sides facing. And then you just sew the right, left, and bottom edge. But definitely make sure to leave a turning opening of about 8 centimeters at the bottom edge, because there we need to turn the whole project inside out, and the bigger it is, the easier it is to turn it inside out. If you want to have a normal flat tote bag, just skip the following step and continue with the steps thereafter. But if you want it to be boxy, do the following. Pull the fabric so that a triangle is created. Make sure that the two seams line up. You can feel that very well. Then use a set square to make sure the triangle is symmetrical. Then place the vertical line on the seam and push the set square up until you measure 5 centimeters on both sides. There you now draw a line, and then you sew along this exact line with a straight stitch After that, you cut off the excess fabric and zigzag stitch or serge the raw edges. And obviously also do the same for the other edge of the inner bag. By the way, just a quick tip, when sewing, make sure that the seam allowance from the bottom seam down here is flipped to the same side here and there. If you want to control if everything went well, just turn the inner bag inside out, and if you can see a plus, as you can see here, you did everything right. Back to the handles, as you can see, I did not manage to turn the handles inside out because the leather is just too stiff. That's why I just top stitched it and painted the raw edges with nail polish. Let's finally attach the handle to our upper outer bag. For this step, there are markings on your pattern that you can just copy onto your fabric with an erasable marker or so. So just lay the handles on the markings, pin them and sew them in place by top stitching the right and left edge on both sides. Make sure that the handle isn't tangled because otherwise you will need to seam rip the whole handle, which, let me tell you, is very annoying. When top stitching, keep in mind to stop sewing about 3 cm below the upper edge, which is important when we sew the inner and outer bag together later on. Next up, we will attach our 2 A pieces to the B piece, which is the bottom of the outer bag. By the way, as you can see right here, I trimmed off the excess fabric from the straps, for example, so that we have a clean edge. This clean edge just makes it easier to now attach the B piece to one A piece, at least for the moment one, right sides facing. And as you can see, I did a kind of double stitch where the straps are because that part needs to be stabilized a bit more. And other than that, there's nothing special. Use a straight stitch, sew foot wide and back stitch at the beginning and at the end of the seam. The following step is to attach now the second A piece to the B piece, making sure that the straps do look or face the same direction, and do the same procedure, so the same line, and if you flip it open you can see that's the right way. After you did that, there is a lot of seam allowance stuff going on there, and it automatically folds towards piece B. This is also what we want, because now we are top stitching along this line so that the seam allowance stays in place. And since our seam allowance itself is only foot wide, we need to sew even closer to the seam, otherwise we cannot catch the seam allowance. Therefore, change the width of the stitch to the maximum, but leave it on straight stitch. And as you can see, in that way we did catch it perfectly. And also the sun is shining right now, that's a good sign. Let's continue now by folding the whole outer bag right sides facing in half. And then you only sew along both sides because the bottom is already closed, and make sure to catch those parts down here, this one and the one at the other side. Maybe do a back stitch couple times. The next step is again the boxy method, which you can skip if your tote bag should not be boxy. I won't explain it a second time, but I will show you again in case you didn't understand it the first time. Congratulations, you made it to the final step, which is to bring the inner and the outer bag together. Therefore, put the outer bag in the inner bag right sides facing and line them up at the upper corner. Then pin it in place and make sure that you don't catch the straps in this seam, so just fold them down as I'm doing it right here. And now, as you can see here, that's the reason why we did not top stitch the straps completely on, because we need a bit space to be able to attach now both bags to each other. And also make sure that the side seams of both bags do line up. Sew all the way around and turn it inside out through this turning opening of the inner bag. After you turn it inside out, it should look at least somehow like this, and then you just push out every edge so that everything lays nice and beautiful, and then you push the whole inner bag inside the outer bag. And here now there comes the last top stitching, which is to top stitch the upper edge of both bags and then close the turning opening that we left just with a normal close straight stitch. And lastly, when everything is inside the bag and everything lays as it should, sew the straps completely on. Maybe sew an X or just sew right and left. Maybe use a different colored thread for the inside. Yeah, and that's it for today's video. I hope you guys enjoyed it. Make sure to subscribe and check out the link in the description box. Here comes now the final reveal. Bye!